Have you ever wondered, what is the color of freedom? Is it red, white, and blue? Hues of orange as rockets fly past the moon? Does it smell like gunpowder and burnt flesh? Like limp limbs on cement, like a child's Mr. Potato Head, except it'll never get pieced back together again. I've often wondered if it is possible to be too dark for an Amber Alert, too insignificant for anyone to say a word, too Congolese, too Sudanese, too African, too black for anyone to even care. I mean, how dare you want things that most just take for granted? How dare you think that this world actually believes in peace? Too naive to see that that is simply a marketing scheme that comes easily like bless yous with no thought or meaning. Have you ever wondered, what is the color of suffering? Does this come in white? I remember the Russian invasion of Ukraine. How many news reporters were caught saying how difficult it was to see this kind of suffering on these faces, with blonde hair and blue eyes looking just like us. Well, not me. I live in a world that turns a blind eye to people of color. Since World War II, the majority of the world's suffering has been huge, so I can understand people being confused when they're so used to their suffering being melanated, almost as though we deserve it, as though it is synonymous with our existence. Have you ever wondered who is allowed to be free, to experience dignity and live with peace? Ask a Haitian the price of freedom. I'm sure they still have the receipt. You see, being oppressed is like living in a sealed bottle where it's only a matter of time before you blow your lid, where you will destroy everyone and everything just to ensure your future has more options and opportunities than your life ever did, so that they can actually live and not just exist as the scorn of the earth, the mold, and no place where any human should ever go, displaced. Kind of like our indigenous are today, but maybe even worse when you can no longer lay claim to land that has historically been yours, so they find themselves scattered wherever the wind blows them, with squatters determining whether or not they can stay, what life for them would look like should they choose to remain on land that they can no longer claim. And even here, every day we acknowledge land we have no plans to give back. We complain about refugees as though it was their lifelong dream to be here. But if we were to ask them, we would learn that they would much rather the comforts of home, the language, land, the foods that they know, the ability to live life on their own terms. But it turns out there are some people whose culture is the stealing of other cultures, yet we expect them to have compassion and empathy for things that they have been isolated against, drunk on comfort, constantly throwing up judgment. And we, as human beings, are so smart that we often forget that we are simply animals too, being domesticated by governments to follow rules and stay in line, to obey and abide by guidelines that often deny us of our right to live. But look at a woman desperate to protect her kids. See how easily she becomes a savage beast. Even the most civilized amongst us can easily become a thief when it comes down to finding food for our children to eat. So our actions aren't always as simple as they might seem, especially when it comes down to trying to define wrong and right, creating a situation that is ripe for the harvesting of lies, blurring the lines between fiction and fact. If the medium is the message, then maybe now the power lies in the hands of the people, who can broadcast their lived realities directly to our screens, which often contradicts what we are shown and told to believe by propaganda machines masquerading as journalists, influenced by governments, sponsored by corporations and lobbyists. And Malcolm X warned us that if we weren't careful, the media would have us hating those being oppressed and loving those doing the oppressing. The media providing window dressing for a global village whose windows have already been blown out. So we become narcissists, totally in love with our view of the world, tearing things down to rebuild them in our own image. We are the unlikely audience to a global theater of bad actors, propped up puppets pretending to be politicians on the world stage. And the people keep saying that this killing doesn't make any sense. And it is not supposed to when it makes so many dollars. So before anything can happen, the government must prepare its people for war, must create a cause for which our sons are going to die for, must give the rich enough time to move their money offshore, to invest in stocks that are going to rise for sure. And after these conditions have been met, then the war machine can go ahead and everything will be fine. As long as the wrong blood doesn't stain corporate bottom lines, so CEOs try to align themselves with the winning team, or at least the one that seems most likely to declare victory. Visions of violence and destruction will flood our minds so that we never question why there are kids in mines dying so that we can have iPhones or cheaper access to gas. We never question how many lives have to be lost in order for us to live the lives that we have. In this way, we also end up with blood on our hands. And we should remember that when we start throwing stones, because the houses that we tear down might end up being our own. In times of war and hardship, there is an unwritten rule that we must always protect women, children, and the elderly. But the men are always disposable. Firewood to be burnt to keep others warm, pawns sacrificed to maintain the power of kings who usually have so much blood on their hands it dries and forms calluses so thick they no longer have fingerprints, which allows them to deny any involvement in the crime. There is no forensic evidence at the scene of the genocide, so they try to wipe their hands clean of any blame, but the blood stains and never goes away. And these pawns sacrifice themselves for castles they will never be invited to enter, queens they will never meet, kings they will never be. They sacrifice themselves like knights, thick skin like body armor, doing exactly what they are told, noble in their ignorance, brainwashed to sacrifice their own and take another human life. The first rule of this fight is that you must always dehumanize the other side so that you never see the fear or humanity in another human's eyes. This way, there can be no violation of human rights, just an onslaught of human wrongs and throngs of women whose wombs are now tombs holding on to memories of what was, told that their sons are no longer with us, moved off of the board to create a new path, wrapped in flags and sent home like cargo to be disposed of. But if you have ever played chess, then you know just how hard it is to kill a king, to get him to be accountable, to have a heart, to see beyond his own desires and potential legacy. He will destroy his queen and everything there to protect him, fight out of every corner before even considering lying down. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. And these pawns are simply canaries underground, a choir of mimes sounding alarms that no one will ever hear as these kings move with impunity as though death will never draw near. Article 1.2 says that the white piece makes the first move in the game of chess, with a black piece going next. Coincidence, I guess, or a historic metaphor of offense and defense. The personal is political. What happens outside of us affects what's inside of us and vice versa. There is no evolution without revolution, no victory without loss, no growth without resistance. If what happens externally also affects us on the inside, who has to be oppressed in order for us to afford our lives? To whose plight will we turn a blind eye? If it means that we can have more than we need, we wear orange tees to remind us of genocide, ignorant to the fine print that reads, depending on where they reside. We are too blind to see the signs of genocides happening right before our eyes, conflicts layered like lasagnas, like buildings that collapse into rubble like the hopes of the oppressed. What color shirts will we wear next? Whose bodies will accessorize our conscience, dead with no names, no histories, no dreams or aspirations? They only exist as numbers on a spreadsheet, as extras in the background of news reports. There is no evolution without revolution. We have been here before. This reminds me of Berlin, the European sin of cutting up Africa with no care for who was already there, borders defined by arbitrary lines drawn in crayon, debated by the people while their resources are pillaged, leaving them piss poor and poverty-stricken, heads of state beheading populations with policy as guillotines. The grass is always green where it hasn't been bombed, but not everyone is lucky enough to even have a lawn. Isn't it odd? How there is always money for war, but never enough for peace. How the media is used to manufacture the belief that you can kill a leader and the people will be free, but you can never kill an idea, the human desire for dignity, freedom, and self-determination, so they keep you distracted. The revolution will not be televised, but the propaganda will. We are the victims of the evil that lives amongst us, who expect us to trust who they say the enemy and terrorist is. But never forget that Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. were both on that list before becoming iconic heroes. So who controls the narrative? Who has the power to name things and narrate public opinion like a wartime David Attenborough, showing us how easily hate can overshadow our humanity? Our values are created by those in power, then are redefined by those who are oppressed. If the medium is the message, could we be giving the power to the people through cell phones, social media, and personal reports? Or do we discredit it and use it to distort, radicalizing people with the evening news? I saw it on my phone, so it has to be true. And with the people confused, we look to those in power for the truth. But they are consumed with what matters to them, so they choose what we need to know and when. In this way, peace of mind stays as elusive as peace, because you'll never have all of the pieces to have a fair shot at the game. There is no evolution without revolution, and you'll always find yourself scrambling, simply trying to make change.